The wind whistled as it tore through the mountains, bringing with it the promise of snow in the coming months. Joseph pulled his cloak closer about him as he shuddered against the cold. He stared at the terrible probability that lay before him and clenched his gloved fist reflexively, feeling the tug of a newly healed skin and the strange, hard surface of the crystal there as he did so. It was both a source of assurance for him that the insanity he'd experienced over the past weeks was not a figment of his fevered imagination, and a source of terror with the realization that if he was not mad, then the horrors he had experienced were real. "This is not going to be easy," a voice beside Joseph muttered from inside of a woolen cowl. Joseph nodded in agreement. The voice belonged to a dwarven ranger, middle-aged and balding, with a long curling mustache and a dark, black beard tumbling over his chest. Thorkim was his name, and he had been the first contact Joseph had made since he'd left the city where the ship that had borne him home had made port. He'd spent weeks wandering in the wilderness, the crystal and his own memories feeding him a steady supply of dark visions and paranoia that caused him to give any settlements a wide berth. Thorkim was part of a small force of rangers and Brock riders that had been dispatched by Caligdrum to report on enemy movement in the early days of the darkness's expansion, but now they had been cut off from the mountain hold by the arrival of thousands of evil armies, answering the call of the nightmares which dwelt below the stony ground. The alliance of good, which also dwelt within the mountain, would be hard-pressed on both fronts. Something would have to give eventually, and Joseph likely held the only solution which did not end with the deaths of his kin and their allies. "Aye, it'll be a hard un," Joseph responded, "but it be summat we have to do. Where would these scunners be the least dense?" Thorkim pointed over to the southeastern ridge where the milling of enemy soldiers seemed to be slightly less pronounced. "That'll be the easiest way, most likely. If'n we can get more of the scattered late-comers to help us punch a hole through, we may get you to the doors and get us inside. But there'll be no way of knowing before we try." Thorkim's accent marked him as a dwarf from the further east, from a land which had close ties to Joseph's family line. This made him inherently trust the ranger despite his eccentricities. "Well, let's do it then," he muttered. "Send out the scouts and see who be hiding in those hills. Gather 'em together and we'll make an assault from there. We needs to make it through, no matter the cost." Thorkim nodded at Joseph's words and walked away to issue the necessary orders. The plan was simple. Thorkim would send out scouts to find the various other races and armies which were loyal to Caligdrum, and gather them together to make a small strike force that they could punch through the enemy lines which sat between Joseph and the dwarf stronghold. They had picked a position where the enemy troops seemed less concentrated, and if everything worked out well, they could bring some much-needed reinforcements to aid the besieged forces within. At the very least, they should be able to get Joseph through so that he could deliver his message, and tell them how they might close the rift that most likely lay in the depths of the crystal mines below this fortress. It was a risky proposition, but a necessary one. He only hoped that those within the fortress were watching, and would respond when they saw the effort being made to reach them when the time came. Joseph closed his eyes and flinched at the images that lay there, waiting for him in the dark. His only hope was that by accomplishing this mission that he might find a way to give himself a brief respite from the ghosts that even now hovered over him like a thunderhead waiting to burst and pour out its misery upon him. He glanced once more upon his home stronghold and prayed for a miracle.